Elena Vieri was traded like currency, a silent bride delivered to a Mafia heir's cold villa by the sea. She expected cruelty, ownership, the familiar weight of a man's control. But Lorenzo De Luca whispered something that shattered her carefully built walls. "I chose you years ago." Those 5 words unlocked memories she'd buried deep, revealing a past she didn't know existed. Now trapped between the girl who learned to disappear and the woman fighting to surface, Elena must decide. Will she remain the possession her father always intended, or discover what it means to choose herself? If you're hooked, stay until the end. Drop a like and comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. The car smelled like leather and her father's cologne. Sharp, expensive, suffocating. Elena Vieri sat perfectly still in the back seat, hands folded in her lap, spine straight against the seat. 23 years old, and she'd mastered the art of taking up as little space as possible. Outside the tinted windows, the Italian coastline blurred past, cliffs dropping into dark water, villages clinging to hillsides like desperate prayers. Beautiful, if you had the luxury of noticing beauty. She didn't. "You understand what's expected?" Her father's voice cut through the silence. Not a question. Giulio Vieri didn't ask questions. "Yes, Papa." "The De Luca family is powerful. This alliance secures our position in the south. You will be respectful, obedient." He paused, his reflection in the rearview mirror catching her eye. Silent, when necessary. "Yes, Papa." Silence. It was what she'd been taught since childhood. Girls who spoke too much attracted the wrong kind of attention. Girls who asked questions made problems. Girls who resisted, well. Elena had watched her mother fade year by year until there was nothing left but a ghost in expensive dresses, moving through their home like smoke. She would not become her mother. She would be better at disappearing. The villa appeared as they rounded a curve, a sprawling estate perched on the cliffs, white stone glowing in the late afternoon sun. Iron gates swung open as their convoy approached, and Elena's stomach tightened. This would be her cage now. Different bars, same lock. "Remember," her father said as the car stopped, "you represent our family. Don't embarrass me." "No, Papa." The door opened. A man in a dark suit extended his hand. One of the staff, she assumed. She took it, stepping out into the salt-laced air. The wind caught her hair, pulling dark strands across her face, and she smoothed them back with practiced efficiency. Everything about her appearance had been calculated this morning. The cream dress that showed nothing, the minimal jewelry, the nude heels that added height without drawing attention. A bride should be seen, her father had said. Not heard, not noticed, not remembered. Just seen. The villa's entrance was all marble and cold elegance. Men in suits lined the hallway. Guards, she realized. Their eyes tracked her movement with professional detachment. She kept her gaze lowered, following her father through a maze of corridors until they reached a set of double doors. Her father knocked once. A voice from inside, low, textured, said, "Come in." The study was darker than she expected. Heavy curtains blocked most of the sunlight, and the furniture was old, expensive, worn with use. Behind a massive desk sat an older man with silver hair and sharp eyes. Beside him stood someone younger, Lorenzo De Luca. She'd seen photographs. They hadn't prepared her. He was tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair pushed back from his face and a jaw that looked like it had been carved with a blade. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray like storm clouds over the ocean, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Giulio. The older man, Antonio De Luca, Lorenzo's father, stood, extending his hand. "Welcome." Her father shook it. "Antonio, thank you for having us." "And this must be Elena." Antonio's gaze swept over her, clinical and assessing. She'd been evaluated like this before, like livestock at market. She kept her expression neutral. "Yes, my daughter." "Beautiful," Antonio said, though his tone suggested he was commenting on a painting, not a person. "Lorenzo, come. Meet your bride." Lorenzo moved around the desk, and Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. He was broader up close, shoulders filling out his black suit, hands that looked like they could break things tucked into his pockets. He stopped a few feet away. "Elena," he said. His voice was quieter than his father's, controlled. "Mr. DeLuca." She kept her eyes on his chest, not his face, safer that way. "Lorenzo," he corrected. "We're to be married. Formality seems unnecessary." Her father cleared his throat. "Elena is well educated. She speaks 3 languages, plays piano, and has been trained in—" "I'd like to speak with her," Lorenzo interrupted. "Alone." The room went still. Antonio laughed, short and sharp. "Eager. I like it. Giulio?" Her father's jaw tightened. He didn't like losing control, even temporarily. But this was Antonio DeLuca's home, his territory. "Of course. Elena, behave." As if she knew how to do anything else. The men left, their footsteps echoing down the hall. The door clicked shut, and then it was just her and Lorenzo in the dim study, silence stretching between them like a held breath. She waited for him to speak, to tell her what he expected, what he wanted. Men always wanted something. Instead, he moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. Sunlight spilled in, sudden and bright, and she blinked against it. "Do you know why you're here?" he asked, his back to her. "Yes." "Tell me." Her throat tightened. "To marry you. To create an alliance between our families." "Is that what you want?" The question startled her. Want? What did want have to do with anything? "It's what my father decided," she said carefully. "That's not what I asked." She didn't answer, couldn't. The truth was too dangerous. She didn't know what she wanted because she'd never been allowed to want anything. Lorenzo turned, and the sunlight behind him made it hard to see his face. "You don't have to be afraid of me." "I'm not afraid." "You're lying." He said it without accusation, just fact. "Your hands are shaking." She looked down. He was right. She curled her fingers into fists, forcing them still. "Elena." He took a step closer. "I'm not going to hurt you." "I know. Men who wanted to hurt you didn't say it out loud, they just did it." "Do you?" Another step. "Because you look like you're waiting for me to." She raised her chin, meeting his eyes for the first time. "I'm waiting for you to tell me what you expect, what the rules are, how I'm supposed to—" She stopped, the words tangling. "What you want from me." Something shifted in his expression. Not pity, something else. "What if I told you I don't want anything from you?" "I'd say you're lying." He smiled then, small and unexpected. "Fair. But what if what I want is for you to tell me what you want?" "That's not how this works." "Why not?" Because no one had ever asked her that before. Because want was a luxury women like her couldn't afford. Because the moment you admitted you wanted something, someone could use it against you. "I should go," she said. "My father—" "I chose you." The words stopped her cold. 3 years ago, I told my father I wanted you. Her heart stuttered. "What?" "The charity gala in Florence. You were there with your family. You wore a blue dress and spent the entire night standing by the window watching the street below like you wanted to jump." He paused. "You didn't think anyone noticed you, but I did." The memory slammed into her. She'd been 20, drowning in her father's expectations, suffocating under the weight of being decorative and silent. She'd escaped to that window, pressed her forehead against the glass, and imagined what would happen if she just opened it and stepped through. She didn't remember seeing him. "Why?" The word came out broken. "Because you looked like I felt." Lorenzo moved closer, and this time she didn't step back, like you were drowning in a room full of air. Her chest tightened. "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." "That's not— Men don't." She shook her head, frustration bleeding through. "This is an arrangement, a business deal. You don't have to pretend—" "I'm not pretending." He was close enough now that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "I chose you, Elena, not because of your father's connections or your family's position. I chose you because when I saw you at that window, I saw someone who understood what it meant to be trapped. And you think marrying me will free you?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. "That's not how this works." No, but maybe we can free each other. The words hung between them, impossible and tempting. She wanted to believe him, but belief was dangerous. Belief got you hurt. I should go find my father, she said, stepping back. Lorenzo didn't stop her. Elena. She paused at the door. You have a choice, he said quietly. Always. Even here. She left without answering because what could she say? That she'd never had a choice in her life? That the word felt foreign in her mouth? That he was offering her something she didn't know how to hold? The hallway was empty. She walked quickly, following the sound of voices until she found her father in another room, drinking whiskey with Antonio. They barely glanced at her. There you are, her father said. We were discussing the wedding. Next month. Antonio has generously offered to host it here. How lovely, she murmured, because that's what she was supposed to say. Lorenzo seems pleased with you. Antonio swirled his drink. That's good. My son is particular about the things he keeps. Keeps, like she was a watch or a car. She smiled, empty and practiced. I'm honored. The rest of the afternoon blurred. More discussions, more arrangements, more decisions made about her life without her input. Finally, as the sun dipped toward the horizon, her father stood. We should go. Elena has much to prepare. She followed him to the car, climbing into the back seat like a puppet on strings. The villa disappeared behind them as they drove away, and she pressed her face against the window, watching it fade. I chose you years ago. Lorenzo's words echoed in her head, persistent and confusing. Men didn't choose women like her. They acquired them, used them, discarded them when they broke. But he'd seen her. At that gala, when she'd been invisible, he'd seen her. Why did that terrify her more than anything else? The month before the wedding passed in a haze of fittings and arrangements. Elena went through the motions with mechanical precision, standing still while designers pinned fabric, nodding when her father's assistant asked questions about flowers and menus, smiling for photographs that would announce the union to the world. She didn't see Lorenzo again, not in person. But twice a week, a package arrived at her father's house. The first contained books, novels, not the approved classics her father kept in his library, but stories about women who traveled and fought and lived. The second contained a letter, handwritten in neat script. Elena, I thought you might like these. No expectations, just books. L. She'd stared at that letter for 20 minutes, trying to decode it. What game was he playing? What did he want her to say? But when the third package arrived, a small watercolor set with another note. You used to paint. Your mother mentioned it once. Do you still? She stopped trying to figure out his angle, because either he was the most manipulative man she'd ever met, or he was genuine. And she didn't know which option scared her more. The night before the wedding, her mother came to her room. Maria Vieri was 52 but looked 70, her face drawn tight with decades of swallowed words and suppressed screams. She sat on the edge of Elena's bed, hands folded in her lap, and said nothing for a long time. Mama? I never wanted this for you, her mother whispered. I wanted you to run, to disappear before he could trade you like I was traded. Elena's throat burned. Then why didn't you help me? Because I'm a coward. Her mother's eyes filled with tears. Because I learned to survive by becoming invisible, and I taught you to do the same. And now, her voice broke. Now you're going to marry a man you don't know, and I can't protect you. Mama, but maybe, her mother continued, gripping Elena's hands, maybe he's different. Maybe you'll be luckier than I was. Elena wanted to scream, luck, as if her entire future came down to luck. I'll be fine, she said instead. I know how to survive. Her mother kissed her forehead, and it felt like goodbye. The wedding was beautiful. That's what everyone said afterward. Beautiful venue, beautiful dress, beautiful bride. Elena stood in front of the mirror in the villa's bridal suite, staring at a stranger in white lace. The dress was elegant, expensive, suffocating. Her hair was pinned up with pearls her mother had worn, and her makeup made her look older. Polished. Perfect. Empty. A knock at the door. Miss Vieri, it's time. Time. As if this was something happening to her, not something she was doing. She walked down the aisle on her father's arm, past rows of people she didn't know, toward a man she barely knew. Lorenzo stood at the altar in a black suit, hands clasped in front of him, expression unreadable. When her father placed her hand in his, Lorenzo's fingers were warm, steady. The ceremony blurred. Words were spoken, vows were made. A ring slid onto her finger, white gold, simple, no diamonds. She looked at it, surprised. "You don't like diamonds," Lorenzo murmured, quiet enough that only she could hear. "I remembered." How did he know that? She'd never told anyone. "You may kiss the bride." Lorenzo's hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing her jawline. "Is this okay?" he asked, voice low. She nodded because what else could she do? His kiss was gentle, brief, nothing like she'd expected, and when he pulled back, his eyes searched hers. "Breathe, Elena." She realized she'd been holding her breath. The reception was endless, dancing, toasts, congratulations from people who didn't care whether she lived or died. Elena smiled until her face ached, laughed on cue, played the role of blushing bride with practiced ease. But then Lorenzo's hand found hers under the table, fingers threading through hers, and he leaned close. 2 more hours. Then we can leave." "Where are we going?" "Wherever you want." It was such a small thing, such an impossible thing. "I don't know what I want," she admitted. "Then we'll figure it out together." The villa was quiet when they finally escaped. Guests had filtered out, staff had disappeared, and the building felt cavernous in its silence. Lorenzo led her through the halls to a wing she hadn't seen before, stopping at a set of double doors. "This is your room," he said, "if you want it." She blinked. "My room?" "I'm not going to force you into my bed, Elena." His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. "When and if that happens, it'll be because you decide, not because you think you have to." Her confusion must have shown because he continued, "You're my wife, but that doesn't make you my property. You have your own space, your own choices." She stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with everything she'd been taught about marriage, about men, about power. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "I know." He smiled, tired and real. "But you will. Get some rest. Tomorrow we can talk." He left her standing in the hallway, door open, room beyond dark and unfamiliar. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her, and leaned against it. The room was large, but not ostentatious. A bed, a desk, a sitting area by the window. Her things had been unpacked, her clothes in the closet, her books on the shelf, the watercolor set on the desk. He'd put the watercolor set on the desk. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain. The ocean stretched out below, black and endless under the moon. Waves crashed against the cliffs, rhythmic and relentless. "I chose you years ago." She pressed her palm against the glass, and for the first time in her life, Elena De Luca, didn't know what to feel. Afraid? Angry? Hopeful? All of it. None of it. She was a wife now, but to a man who said she had choices, who gave her space, who remembered she didn't like diamonds and used to paint. Either he was the best liar she'd ever met, or he was telling the truth, and she didn't know which possibility terrified her more. Outside, the ocean kept crashing. Inside, Elena stood at the window and wondered if drowning felt like this, like finally having air but forgetting how to breathe. Oh, she didn't sleep that night. Instead, she sat at the desk and opened the watercolor set. The paints were good quality, expensive. She hadn't painted in years. Her father had called it a waste of time, a distraction from more important things. But her hands remembered. She painted the ocean, dark blues and grays, white foam catching moonlight. She painted until her fingers cramped and the sky outside began to lighten. And when she finally set down the brush, she looked at what she'd created and felt something crack open inside her chest. It wasn't beautiful. The colors bled together in places, the perspective was off, and the waves looked more like scars than water. But it was hers. A knock at the door startled her. She stood quickly, heart racing. "Elena?" Lorenzo's voice muffled through the wood. "Are you awake?" She opened the door. He was dressed simply, jeans, a white shirt, no shoes. His hair was messy, like he'd been running his hands through it, and there were shadows under his eyes. "Did you sleep?" he asked. No? You? No. He noticed the painting on the desk, and something shifted in his expression. Can I come in? She stepped aside and he walked past her to the desk, studying her work in the growing daylight. She waited for judgment, criticism, something. It's angry, he said finally. The ocean. Yes. Is that how you feel? The question lodged in her throat. Yes. No. Maybe. She didn't know how to name what she felt. I don't know what I feel, she admitted. I was taught not to feel, to be quiet and still, and... She stopped, the words running out. Lorenzo turned to face her. Can I tell you something? She nodded. My mother killed herself when I was 12. Elena's breath caught. She was like you, he continued, voice steady but strained. Beautiful, silent, trapped. My father married her for connections, kept her like a prize, never once asked what she wanted. He paused. She drove her car off these cliffs. Everyone said it was an accident, but I saw her that morning. I saw her face. She'd made a choice. Lorenzo, I'm not telling you this for sympathy, he cut in. I'm telling you because I spent my entire life watching my father break her. And I swore I'd never do that. I'd never make someone disappear the way he made her disappear. His gray eyes locked on hers. So when I say you have a choice, Elena, I mean it. I will never be the reason you drive off a cliff. The raw honesty of it gutted her. This man, this stranger she'd married, was offering her something she'd never had. The truth. Messy and painful and real. What if I don't know how to choose, she whispered. Then we'll start small. He gestured to the painting. You chose to paint last night. That's enough. That's not... It is. He moved closer, but not too close, giving her space. Every choice you make, no matter how small, is yours. And I'll never take that from you. Elena looked at him, really looked, and saw someone as trapped as she was. Different cage, same bars, and maybe that's what he'd meant when he said they could free each other. I'm afraid, she said. The admission felt like stepping off the edge of the cliff. Of me? Of this. Of wanting something and having it taken away. Of trusting you and being wrong. Good, Lorenzo said. Fear means you're still alive. It means you haven't disappeared yet. Is that supposed to be comforting? No, it's supposed to be true. They stood there in the growing light, the ocean crashing below, and Elena felt something shift. Not fixed, not healed, but cracked open just enough to let something new in. I need time, she said, to figure out who I am when I'm not being what everyone else wants. You have it, as much as you need. And if I never... She hesitated. If I can't, then we'll figure that out too. It wasn't a promise of happiness. It wasn't a guarantee of love. But it was honest. And for the first time in Elena's life, honest felt like enough to start with. Okay, she said quietly. Okay? Okay. She took a breath, testing the weight of her own voice. I'll try. I'll try to choose. Lorenzo smiled, and it transformed his face, made him look younger, less haunted. Then we'll try together. Outside, the sun broke over the horizon, spilling gold across the water. Inside, Elena stood in her own room, in her own space, with a man who said she had choices. She didn't know if she believed him yet, but she wanted to. And wanting, terrifying as it was, felt like the first real thing she'd felt in years. The days that followed developed a rhythm Elena didn't know how to name. Not comfortable. Comfort implied ease, and nothing about her new life felt easy. But predictable, maybe. Safe in its strange way. Lorenzo left her alone most mornings. She'd wake to find coffee outside her door, still hot, with a note in his handwriting. Sometimes just a word. Breathe. Or a question. What do you want for breakfast? Once, inexplicably, the sky is the same color as your painting today. She never answered the notes, didn't know how, but she kept them, folded in the desk drawer beneath the watercolors. Afternoons, she explored the villa. It was massive, full of rooms that seemed to serve no purpose. A library with thousands of books, a music room with a grand piano gathering dust, a greenhouse where nothing grew anymore. The staff moved around her like she was furniture, polite but distant. She didn't mind. Invisibility was familiar. What wasn't familiar was Lorenzo's presence in the evenings. He didn't demand anything, didn't expect her to perform or entertain. Sometimes he'd find her in the library and sit in the chair across from hers, reading his own book. Sometimes he'd ask if she wanted to walk the grounds, and they'd move through the gardens in silence, the ocean roaring below them. It was the silence that unnerved her most. Not hostile or cold, just there, like he was waiting for something. For her to speak first, to choose the conversation. On the fifth night, she finally did. "Why do you do this?" The words came out sharper than she intended. They were in the library, her with a novel she wasn't really reading, him with papers spread across the coffee table, business things she didn't understand. He looked up. "Do what?" "This." She gestured vaguely at the space between them. "Pretend we're normal, that this is normal. What would you prefer?" "I don't know. Maybe for you to act like every other man I've met. Tell me what to do, what to wear, who to talk to. Make it clear what you expect so I can—" She stopped, frustration building. "So I know the rules." Lorenzo set down his pen. "There are no rules, Elena. Everyone has rules. Not with me." "That's worse." The admission burst out before she could stop it. "At least with rules, I know where the lines are. This, whatever this is, I don't know what you want from me. I don't know what I'm supposed to be." He was quiet for a long moment, studying her with those storm gray eyes. "You're supposed to be whatever you are. That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I have." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Elena, I'm not playing a game with you. I'm not testing you or waiting for you to fail. I told you, I chose you because I saw someone who understood what it meant to be trapped. Someone who was still fighting to exist even when everyone around them wanted them to disappear. I'm not fighting anything. I learned a long time ago that fighting makes things worse." "Is that what you think?" His voice was soft, not accusatory. "Because from where I'm sitting, painting at 3 a.m. when you think no one's awake is fighting. Reading books your father wouldn't approve of is fighting. Asking me questions instead of staying silent, that's fighting too." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Was he right? Had she been fighting all along without realizing it? "I'm scared," she said quietly. "All the time. I'm scared of wanting things because wanting means losing. I'm scared of trusting you because everyone I've ever trusted has hurt me. And I'm scared that you're going to wake up one day and realize I'm not worth this, whatever this is." Lorenzo stood, crossing the space between them. He knelt in front of her chair, not touching, just close. "Can I tell you what I'm scared of?" She nodded. "I'm scared that you'll never believe you have a choice, that you'll spend your whole life waiting for me to turn into my father, or yours, and you'll miss the moments where you could have been free." He paused. "I'm scared I'll fail you the way I failed my mother, that I'll see you drowning and not know how to pull you out." "You can't save me," Elena whispered. "No one can save me but me." "I know. That's what terrifies me." The honesty of it cracked something in her chest. This man, this powerful, dangerous man, was admitting he was scared, that he didn't have all the answers, that he was as lost as she was. "I don't know how to be a wife," she said. "Not the kind you seem to want." "What kind do I want?" "Someone real, someone who talks and chooses and—" She struggled for words. "Someone who isn't pretending to be alive." "Then start there." Lorenzo's hand hovered near hers on the armrest, not quite touching. "Start with the smallest real thing you can manage, and we'll build from there." Elena looked at his hand, so close to hers. 1 inch, maybe less. It would be so easy to close the distance, to take what he was offering, but easy had always been a trap before. "I need more time," she said. "You have it." He stood, returning to his papers, and Elena stared at the book in her lap without seeing the words. Something had shifted in that conversation. Not fixed, not solved, but acknowledged. The space between them felt different now, less like a void and more like a bridge being built one plank at a time. She wasn't ready to cross it yet, but maybe, eventually, she could be. The memory came back 3 days later, sudden and violent. She was in the greenhouse, trying to coax life into the dead plants. when her hand stilled on a pot of withered roses. The smell hit her first, earth and decay, and something floral underneath. And then she was somewhere else. Somewhen else. 14 years old, standing in her mother's garden while her father's voice raged from the house. Her mother beside her, hands shaking as she pruned roses that didn't need pruning. "Mama, why do you stay?" "Because leaving is worse, Bambina." "How do you know? You've never tried." Her mother's face had crumpled. "Because women like us don't get to try. We survive. That's all." Elena dropped the pot. It shattered on the greenhouse floor, soil and ceramic spreading like a wound. Her hands were shaking. No, her whole body was shaking, breath coming too fast, vision narrowing. "Elena?" Lorenzo's voice, distant and muffled. She felt his hands on her shoulders, gentle but grounding. "Breathe. You need to breathe." "I can't. I can't." "Yes, you can. Look at me." He moved in front of her, blocking out the greenhouse, the roses, the memory. "Count with me." 1. She tried, failed, tried again. 1, she gasped. 2. 2. They counted to 10 together, his voice steady, his hands warm on her shoulders. By the time they reached 10, her breathing had slowed. The panic had receded to something manageable. "What happened?" he asked. "A memory. I don't know why. It just..." She looked at the broken pot, the scattered soil. "I'm sorry. I don't care about the pot." Lorenzo's hands moved to cup her face, tilting her head up so she had to look at him. "Talk to me." "It's nothing. Just my mother. Something she said when I was young." "It's not nothing if it made you break." Elena pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. "She told me women like us don't get to leave. We just survive. And Her voice cracked. "I looked at these roses and realized I'm becoming her, silent and scared and waiting to disappear." "You're not her." "How do you know? You don't know me. You saw me once 3 years ago and decided, what, that I was worth saving?" "No." Lorenzo's voice was firm. "I decided you were worth knowing. There's a difference." "Is there?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. "Because from where I'm standing, this feels like pity. Like you're trying to fix some broken thing because it makes you feel better about your mother." The words hung between them, cruel and raw. She wanted to take them back, wanted to swallow them down and pretend she hadn't said them. But they were out now. Real. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "You think I married you out of pity?" "I don't know what to think. You won't tell me what you want. You won't touch me or demand anything or..." She stopped, frustration bleeding into something else, something uglier. "You treat me like I'm made of glass, and I hate it. I hate not knowing if you actually want me or if I'm just some project to make yourself feel less guilty." "Is that really what you think?" His voice was too calm, too controlled. "I don't know what I think. I don't know anything anymore." Lorenzo stepped back, putting distance between them. "You want to know what I want? Fine, I'll tell you." He ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked frustrated, angry even. "I want you to stop waiting for me to hurt you. I want you to stop testing me by saying cruel things to see if I'll leave. I want you to believe, just for one moment, that maybe I'm telling the truth when I say I chose you because I saw someone worth choosing." "People don't do that," Elena shot back. "People don't choose someone because they're broken. You're not broken. You're surviving. What's the difference? Broken things can't grow. You're here, standing in a greenhouse, trying to bring dead things back to life. That's not broken. That's hope." The word hit her like a slap. Hope. Such a small word for such a dangerous thing. "I don't have hope," she whispered. "Yes, you do. You're just scared to admit it." She wanted to argue, to push back, but he was right, and that was the most terrifying part. Some small, stubborn part of her did hope, hoped that maybe he meant what he said, that maybe this could be different, that maybe she could be different. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "What I said about your mother, that was cruel. It was honest." Lorenzo moved closer again, but slower this time. "And I'd rather have your honesty than your politeness." even if my honesty is ugly? Especially then. They stood in the ruined greenhouse, broken pottery between them, and Elena felt something shift again. This time it felt less like cracking and more like shedding, old skin falling away to reveal something raw underneath. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, how to be real with someone. Neither do I, Lorenzo said, but we can figure it out together. What if we can't? Then at least we tried. It wasn't a guarantee, wasn't a promise that everything would work out, but it was honest, and right now, honest was all she had to hold on to. Okay, she said. Okay. That night, Elena couldn't sleep again. But this time, instead of painting, she found herself standing outside Lorenzo's door. Her hand hovered over the wood, heart racing, mind screaming at her to go back to her room, but she was tired of being scared. She knocked. Come in. He was sitting up in bed, reading by lamplight. The room was simpler than she expected. Dark furniture, minimal decoration, windows overlooking the cliffs. He looked surprised to see her. Elena? Can I... She faltered. Can I ask you something? Of course. He set down his book, giving her his full attention. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. That day, at the gala, you said you saw me at the window. I did. What else did you see? Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, considering. I saw someone who was pretending very hard to exist, smiling at the right time, saying the right things, being exactly what everyone expected. But when you thought no one was looking, you stopped pretending. And the realness of that moment, he paused. It was the most honest thing I'd seen in years. I wanted to jump, Elena said softly. Not to die, just to feel something other than empty. I know. How? Because I'd stood at that same window 6 months earlier at a different party, thinking the same thing. The admission gutted her. This man who seemed so controlled, so certain, he'd wanted to jump too. Why didn't you? She asked. Because I realized that jumping would be letting them win. My father, this life, all the expectations. And I was too angry to give them that satisfaction. So you stayed angry instead. Yes. And alone. And miserable. He smiled, sad and real. Until I saw you, and I realized maybe I didn't have to be alone in it. Elena moved closer to the bed, her hands twisting together. I'm angry too. All the time. But I was taught that anger was dangerous. That good women don't get angry. Good women, Lorenzo said, is a phrase invented by men who were scared of what women would do if they stopped performing. The word struck something deep. All her life she'd been performing, the obedient daughter, the perfect bride, the silent wife. And underneath it all, rage had been building like a storm waiting to break. What if I stop performing? She whispered. What if I let myself be angry and you don't like what you see? Then I'll deal with it. But Elena, he leaned forward. I'd rather see you angry than invisible. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something she hadn't expected. Permission. Permission to be messy and complicated and real. I'm angry at you, she said, testing the words. Why? Because you saw me drowning and you didn't help. You watched me for 3 years and you never... Her voice broke. You never tried to save me. Lorenzo's expression shifted, pain flickering across his face. You're right. What? You're right. I saw you suffering and I didn't step in. I told myself I was waiting for the right time, the right opportunity. But the truth is, I was a coward. I was scared that if I approached you, your father would hurt you, or that you'd reject me and I'd lose the hope of maybe, someday. He stopped. I failed you. And I'm sorry. The apology landed like a punch. She'd expected excuses, justifications, not this raw admission of fault. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I wanted you to trust me first. But you're right. You can't trust someone who only shows you their best parts. You need to see the failures too. Elena sat on the edge of his bed, exhausted suddenly. I don't know if I can forgive you for that. I'm not asking you to, not yet. Then what are you asking? For time, for honesty, for a chance to do better now than I did then. It was such a small ask, such an impossible ask. I'm still angry, she said. Good. Be angry. Scream if you need to. Break things. Just. He reached out, and this time she didn't pull away when his hand found hers. Just don't disappear. His hand was warm, solid, real. I don't know how to not disappear, she admitted. It's the only thing I'm good at. Then I'll keep reminding you that you're here. Every day if I have to. Elena looked at their joined hands, at the way his fingers threaded through hers like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wasn't ready to forgive him, wasn't ready to trust him completely. But maybe she could start with this. One hand holding another, proof that someone could touch her without taking. Okay, she whispered. Okay? Okay? She took a shaky breath. I'll try. I'll try to stay. Lorenzo squeezed her hand gently. That's all I'm asking. They sat in silence, the lamplight casting shadows across the walls, the ocean a distant roar beyond the windows. And for the first time since arriving at the villa, Elena felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't completely alone. She didn't stay in his room that night, wasn't ready for that. But when she went back to her own bed, she carried the memory of his hand in hers, warm and steady and real. And that, she thought, as sleep finally came, was enough for now. The next week brought changes, small but significant. Lorenzo started joining her for breakfast, and they'd eat in the sunroom overlooking the gardens, conversation tentative but growing. He told her about his business, imports, mostly legitimate, some less so. She didn't ask for details she wasn't ready to hear. She told him about her childhood, the parts that didn't hurt too much to share. The piano lessons her mother insisted on, the books she'd hidden under her mattress, the way her father's voice could fill a room and make her want to fold into nothing. He never hit me, she said one morning, staring at her coffee. People think that makes it better, that words can't hurt as much as fists. They're wrong. I know, but I spent years thinking maybe I was too sensitive, too weak, that if I'd been stronger, I could have... She stopped. I don't know. Survived better, maybe? You survived exactly the way you needed to. There's no right way to endure trauma. The word made her flinch. Trauma. Such a clinical term for something that had shaped every part of her. Do you ever think about her? Elena asked, changing the subject. Your mother? Lorenzo was quiet for a long time. Every day, wondering if I could have done something different, said something that would have made her stay. You were 12. Old enough to know she was breaking, too young to know how to stop it. It wasn't your responsibility. I know. Knowing doesn't make it easier. They fell into silence, and Elena realized they were doing something neither of them was good at. Being honest about the broken parts. Not fixing them, not hiding them, just acknowledging they existed. It was terrifying and necessary in equal measure. Later that afternoon, she found herself in the music room. The piano sat in the corner, untouched and perfect. She'd avoided it since arriving, afraid of what might happen if she tried to play. Music had been her escape once, the only place she could exist without permission. Her father had ruined it by turning it into a performance, making her play for his guests, for his business associates, reducing her joy to another tool for his advancement. But Lorenzo wasn't her father. She sat at the bench, fingers hovering over the keys. Then, before fear could stop her, she pressed down. The note rang out clear and true, then another, and another. She didn't know what she was playing at first. Fragments of pieces she'd learned years ago, melodies she'd composed in her head but never written down. Her fingers found their rhythm, and the music poured out, messy and unpracticed but real. She didn't hear Lorenzo enter, didn't notice him until she finished and found him standing in the doorway, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Sorry, she said quickly. I should have asked. Don't apologize. He moved into the room, leaning against the wall. That was beautiful. It was sloppy. It was honest. There was that word again. Honest. He used it like a compliment, like it was worth more than perfect. Will you play something else? He asked. She almost said no, almost retreated back into silence, but his earlier words echoed, be angry, break things, just don't disappear. Only if you promise not to judge. I promise. Elena turned back to the piano. This time, she played something from memory, a piece her mother used to hum while cooking before the silence had swallowed her whole. It was simple, melancholy, full of longing. When she finished, Lorenzo was quiet. Then, "Your mother sang that? How did you know?" "You played it like you were remembering someone." Elena's throat tightened. "She used to be different, before my father, before everything. She used to sing all the time. Then one day, she just stopped. And you're afraid you'll stop too." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Yes." Lorenzo pushed off the wall, crossing to the piano. He sat beside her on the bench, close but not touching. "Then keep playing, even when it's hard, even when it hurts, because the moment you stop, they win." "They?" "Everyone who tried to make you disappear." Elena looked at him, this man who kept saying things that cracked her open. "Why do you care so much?" "Because I know what it's like to watch someone disappear, and I know what it's like to disappear yourself." He met her eyes. "And I don't want either of us to do that anymore." The honesty of it stole her breath. This wasn't about saving her or fixing her. This was about two people who understood what it meant to survive by erasing yourself, trying to figure out how to exist again. "I'm still angry at you," she said softly. "I know. And I don't trust you yet. I know that too. But She struggled for words. "I want to try. I want to believe this could be different." "Then let's start there." Elena looked at the piano keys, at Lorenzo beside her, at the afternoon light spilling through the windows. This wasn't love, wasn't even close, but it was something, a foundation maybe, a place to start building from. "Teach me something," she said suddenly. Lorenzo raised an eyebrow. "Teach you what?" "Anything, something about your world, your business, something real." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Okay, but not here. Come with me." He led her through the villa to a room she hadn't seen before. His office, she realized. It was darker than the rest of the house, all leather and wood and maps pinned to walls. A desk covered in papers, phones she knew were for business that wasn't entirely legal. "This is where I work," he said, closing the door behind them. "Where I make the decisions that keep my family's empire running. Show me." So he did. He explained the trade routes, the legitimate businesses that fronted for less legitimate ones, the delicate balance of power between families and territories. He didn't soften it or hide the violence underneath. He showed her the truth, ugly and complicated and real. And Elena listened, absorbing it all, feeling something shift inside her. This was his world, dangerous and morally gray and nothing like the sanitized version her father had presented of his own dealings. But it was honest. "You're not scared," Lorenzo observed. "Should I be?" "Most people would be." Elena looked at the maps, the territories marked in red and black. "I've been scared my whole life. This is just..." She searched for words. "A different kind of dangerous. And you're okay with that?" "I don't know yet. But I'd rather know the truth than live in a comfortable lie." Lorenzo smiled, genuine and surprised. "You're stronger than you think. Or more damaged than you realize. Maybe both." She laughed, short and unexpected. It felt strange on her tongue, laughter in a room dedicated to violence and power. But maybe that was the point. Finding moments of lightness, even in the dark. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not lying to me. For treating me like I can handle the truth. You can handle more than you know." Elena looked at him, standing in his office, in his world, and felt something shift between them. Not trust, not yet. But the possibility of it. The beginning of something that might eventually become real. "I should go," she said. "Let you work." "Elena." She paused at the door. "You played beautifully today. Don't stop." The words settled into her chest, warm and unexpected. "I won't." As she walked back through the villa, Elena realized something had changed. She was starting to exist here, not just survive, but exist, starting to take up space instead of shrinking from it. It was small, fragile, easily broken, but it was hers, and that was enough. The photographs arrived on a Tuesday morning, delivered by a courier Elena didn't recognize. Lorenzo was in a meeting with his father when Marco, one of the guards, brought the manila envelope to her in the library. Mrs. DeLuca, he said, his usual stoic expression cracked with something that looked like concern. This came for you. No return address. Elena took the envelope, and the weight of it felt wrong, too heavy, too deliberate. Thank you, Marco. He hesitated. Should I get Mr. DeLuca? No, I can handle it. But her hands shook as she opened it, and what she found inside made her stomach drop. Photographs. Dozens of them. All of her. Walking through the villa gardens, sitting at the piano, standing at her bedroom window in the early morning light. Some were recent. She recognized the dress she'd worn yesterday. Others were older. Much older. One made her breath catch, her at 17 leaving her father's house carrying groceries. Another at 19 outside the university she'd attended for exactly one semester before her father decided education was wasting her time. More from the Florence Gala, the night Lorenzo claimed he'd first seen her, but these weren't taken from across a room. These were close. Invasive. Someone had been watching her for years, and they wanted her to know it. At the bottom of the stack, a single note in typed letters. He's been watching longer than you think. Ask him about the bargain. Elena's hands were trembling so badly the photographs scattered across the floor. Her breathing came too fast, vision narrowing. Not a panic attack. Not now. She forced herself to count, to breathe, but the images kept flashing through her mind. All those moments she'd thought were private, captured and cataloged by someone she'd never seen. Elena? She looked up to find Lorenzo in the doorway, his expression shifting from mild curiosity to alarm as he saw the photographs spread across the floor. What is this? He crossed the room quickly, kneeling to gather them. His face went hard as stone as he looked through them, jaw tightening with each image. Who sent these? I don't know. Marco brought them. Her voice sounded distant, disconnected. Lorenzo, these go back years. Someone's been… I know. His voice was flat, dangerous. I know what this is. What bargain? The words came out sharper than she intended. The note mentions a bargain. What does that mean? Lorenzo's eyes closed briefly, and Elena saw something she'd never seen before. Guilt, raw and unmistakable. Tell me, she demanded, right now. What bargain? Elena Don't. She stood, stepping back when he reached for her. Don't lie to me. You promised honesty, so be honest. What bargain? Lorenzo set the photographs on the table, carefully, like they might explode. When I told my father I wanted to marry you, he had conditions. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to make sure you were suitable, that you wouldn't be a liability. Suitable. The word tasted like poison. He had me investigated. Yes. For how long? Lorenzo met her eyes, and she saw the truth before he said it. 3 years. From the night of the gala until the wedding. The room tilted. Elena grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. 3 years. You had someone follow me for 3 years. Not me. My father, I didn't… He stopped at the look on her face. I knew about it. I didn't order it, but I knew. And you didn't think to tell me? You didn't think that maybe, just maybe, I deserved to know someone was cataloging my every move? I was trying to protect you. From what? She laughed, high and broken. From the truth? From knowing that the man who claimed he saw me, who said he chose me, was actually having me stalked like some kind of… She couldn't finish. The betrayal was too vast, too complete. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Lorenzo? Explain it to me. Because from where I'm standing, this looks exactly like what you promised you weren't. Control, ownership, another man deciding he had the right to watch me without my knowledge or consent. You're right. The admission came quickly, forcefully. You're absolutely right. I should have told you. I should have stopped it. But I was trying to… He stopped, frustration bleeding into his voice. My father wouldn't agree to the marriage unless he was certain you wouldn't bring problems. And I was terrified that if I pushed back, if I refused, he'd find another way to stop it, another way to keep me from… From what? Your project? Your redemption arc? The words hit like a slap. Lorenzo's expression went carefully blank, and Elena realized she'd struck something vital. Good. Let him hurt the way she was hurting. Is that what you think? His voice was too quiet, too controlled. I don't know what to think anymore. You said you chose me. But how can I believe that when you've been watching me like some kind of experiment, testing to see if the broken girl could be fixed? That's not... Then what is it? She was yelling now, voice echoing off the library walls. Tell me what this is, Lorenzo, because I'm losing my mind trying to figure out if anything you've said is true or if I'm just another chess piece in whatever game you're playing. There's no game! His control finally cracked, voice rising to match hers. There's just me, trying not to repeat my father's mistakes, trying to give you what my mother never had: choice, freedom, a chance to exist, and failing spectacularly because I'm too much like him to know how to do it right. You are like him. The words came out cold. Final. You watched me. You knew someone was invading my privacy, cataloging my life, and you said nothing. That's exactly what he would do. That's exactly what my father would do. Lorenzo flinched like she'd hit him. Elena, no. She held up a hand, stopping him. I need you to leave. I can't. Her breath hitched, panic clawing at her throat. Please, just go. I'm not leaving you like this. Then I'll leave. She headed for the door, but Lorenzo moved faster, blocking her path. Not touching, just there. Move, she said. Not until you hear me. All of it. I don't want to hear anything else from you. Too bad. His voice was hard now, stripped of the gentleness he usually used with her. You want honesty? Fine. Here's the truth. I knew my father was having you watched. I knew it was wrong. And I let it happen anyway because I was selfish and desperate, and so convinced I could make it right later that I ignored how wrong it was in the moment. Elena tried to step around him, but he matched her movement. I told myself I'd tell you eventually, he continued, after you trusted me, after you felt safe. I told myself it was for your protection, but that was a lie. It was for mine. Because I was terrified that if you knew the truth, you'd look at me exactly the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm just another man who thinks he owns you. You don't own me. I know that, but I acted like I did, and I'm sorry. The apology hung between them, inadequate and necessary. Elena's hands were shaking again, her whole body vibrating with rage and hurt, and something she couldn't name. Sorry doesn't fix this, she said quietly. Sorry doesn't give me back 3 years of privacy. Sorry doesn't change the fact that every moment I thought was mine. Walking in my father's garden, studying at the library, standing alone in my room, someone was watching, taking pictures, reporting back to your father like I was a suspect. You're right. It doesn't. Lorenzo's voice was rough. And I can't undo it. I can only promise it's over. The surveillance stopped the day we married. No one is watching you now. How do I know that's true? Because I ordered it myself. Because I told my father that if he ever invaded your privacy again, I'd burn his entire operation to the ground. He paused. You can believe that or not, but it's the truth. Elena wanted to believe him, wanted it so badly it physically hurt, but belief required trust, and trust required knowing that someone wouldn't lie to you about the fundamental things. And this was fundamental. Who sent the photographs? She asked. I don't know, but I'm going to find out. Why now? Why send them now? Lorenzo's expression darkened. Someone wants to drive a wedge between us. Someone who knows about the surveillance and wants to use it to... He stopped. I have enemies. People who would benefit from my marriage falling apart. So this is about business, about your empire. It's about hurting me by hurting you. The distinction felt meaningless. Either way, she was collateral damage in a war she hadn't chosen. Again. I need time, Elena said. I need to think. Take it. Lorenzo stepped aside, finally giving her space. But Elena, wherever you go in this villa, you're safe. I promise you that. She looked at him, at this man who'd promised her choices and then stolen them with surveillance she'd never consented to. Your promises don't mean much to me right now. The words landed hard. She saw them hit, saw the way Lorenzo's expression closed off, protective and hurt. But she couldn't bring herself to care. Not now. Not when her entire world had just shifted again. She left the library, walking quickly through the halls until she reached her room. Once inside, she locked the door and pressed her back against it, sliding down until she sat on the floor. The photographs kept flashing through her mind. All those moments she'd thought were hers. Private. Safe. Violated by someone's camera, someone's attention, someone's need to know everything about her. And Lorenzo had known. For 3 years, he'd known, and he'd said nothing. She pulled her knees to her chest and let herself break. Not crying. She'd learned long ago that tears changed nothing, but that silent, internal shattering that happened when you realized the person you were starting to trust had been lying by omission all along. The worst part was that she understood. In a horrible, twisted way, she understood why he'd done it. In their world, in the world of power and violence and family empires, surveillance was protection. Information was currency. And Lorenzo had been trying to navigate between his father's demands and her safety. But understanding didn't make it hurt less. Understanding didn't change the fact that he'd watched her without permission, had known things about her life that she'd never shared, had built their entire relationship on a foundation of secrets. She sat there for hours, watching the light change outside her window, trying to figure out what came next. Leave? She had nowhere to go. Her father wouldn't take her back. She was damaged goods now, a married woman who'd failed to secure her position. Stay? And pretend she could trust a man who'd proven he'd sacrifice her privacy for his own goals? A soft knock interrupted her spiral. Elena, Lorenzo's voice muffled through the door. I'm not asking you to open it. I need you to know something. She didn't answer, but she heard him continue anyway. The person who sent those photographs? I think I know who it was. And I'm going to handle it, but that's not... He paused. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because you were right about everything. I've been so focused on not being my father that I became him anyway. Controlling, possessive, convinced I knew what was best for you. Elena closed her eyes, listening. You asked me once what I wanted from you, Lorenzo continued. I said I wanted you to be whatever you are. But the truth is, I wanted you to be what I needed you to be. Proof that I could do better than my father. Proof that I wasn't like him. And in trying to prove that, I did exactly what he would have done. His voice was getting rougher, more strained. I can't fix this, I know that. But I can promise that from now on, no more secrets, no more surveillance, no more decisions made about your life without your knowledge. If that's not enough, if you can never trust me again, I understand. But you should know that meeting you, choosing you, wasn't about redemption. It was about recognizing someone who understood what it meant to survive by disappearing, and hoping that maybe, together, we could figure out how to be real again. Silence. Elena pressed her palm against the door, feeling the solid wood between them. I'm going to find out who sent those photographs, Lorenzo said, and I'm going to make sure they never come near you again. That's not negotiable. But everything else? Whether you stay, whether you leave, whether you ever forgive me, that's your choice. And I'll respect whatever you decide. His footsteps retreated down the hall, and Elena was alone again with her thoughts and the echo of his words. She wanted to hate him, wanted it to be simple and clean. He'd betrayed her, she'd leave, end of story. But nothing in her life had ever been simple. And the horrible truth was that some part of her understood why he'd done it, understood the impossible position of trying to protect someone while living in a world where protection required control. That didn't make it right. Understanding and forgiving were different things, but it made it complicated. She stood finally, her legs stiff from sitting on the floor. The photographs were probably still in the library, scattered evidence of her stolen privacy. She should burn them, should destroy every single one and pretend they'd never existed. Instead, she found herself walking back to the library, some compulsion pulling her toward the truth she'd been running from. The room was empty. Lorenzo had left, taking the photographs with him. But on the table where they'd been, he'd left something else, a file. Thick, official-looking, marked with her name. Elena opened it with shaking hands. Inside was everything, every surveillance report his father had ordered, every photograph, every detail of her life for 3 years. But also, notes in Lorenzo's handwriting, comments in the margins, and one page dated 6 months after the surveillance began, with a single sentence written in bold. This stops when we marry, no conditions. She flipped through more pages and found a letter, handwritten, addressed to Antonio De Luca. Lorenzo's formal request to end the surveillance, to respect her privacy, to give her the life his mother never had. The letter was dated 2 years ago, long before their wedding, and beneath it, Antonio's response. Continue surveillance until marriage, non-negotiable. Elena's hands stilled. Lorenzo had tried to stop it. He'd fought his father and lost, and continued anyway because stopping the entire engagement would have meant losing her completely. It didn't absolve him, didn't erase the violation or the betrayal, but it complicated the narrative she'd built in her head, that he'd been complicit, willing, uncaring about her privacy. He'd cared. He'd just been powerless to stop it without destroying everything. She closed the file, her mind a mess of contradictions, anger and understanding, betrayal and empathy. The desperate need to punish him, and the equally desperate need to believe he'd been trying his best in an impossible situation. A sound from the doorway made her turn. Lorenzo stood there, looking exhausted. You found the file. You left it for me? You deserved to see all of it, not just the parts that made me look guilty. Elena held up the file. This doesn't make it okay. I know. But it... She struggled for words. It makes it less simple. Nothing about this is simple. She looked at him, this man who tried to save her and ended up hurting her in the process. I don't know if I can forgive this. I'm not asking you to. What are you asking? Lorenzo stepped into the room, but kept his distance. For you to stay long enough to let me prove that I can do better, that I can be someone worthy of your trust. Not because I promise to be perfect, but because I'll be honest about my failures. And if I can't, if I try and realize I'm too broken to trust anyone, then you're not broken. You're smart. Because trust should be earned, not given freely to people who've hurt you. The words settled into her chest, true and painful. She was tired. So tired of trying to figure out what was real and what was manipulation. What was love and what was control. I need rules, she said finally. Clear boundaries. Things I can hold you to. Tell me what you need. No more secrets. If your business puts me in danger, I need to know. If your father makes demands about me, I need to know. If someone so much as looks at me wrong, I need to... Her voice cracked. I need to know what's happening in my own life. Done. I need my own money, my own account, so if I decide to leave, I'm not trapped. I'll set it up tomorrow. And I need... She stopped, the next request harder. I need you to understand that this broke something between us. And I don't know if it can be fixed. Lorenzo's expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the pain underneath. I understand. Do you? Because you keep talking about second chances and proving yourself, but Lorenzo, she met his eyes. Some things don't heal. Some damage is permanent. And I need you to accept that maybe I'll never fully trust you. Maybe I'll always be waiting for the other shoe to drop. Then I'll spend the rest of my life making sure there's no other shoe. He moved closer, and this time she didn't step back. I know I broke something, and I know sorry isn't enough. But Elena, I'm not giving up on us. Not because I think I can fix you or save you, but because I've seen who you are when you're not performing, and that person is worth fighting for. Even if that person can't love you back? The question hung between them, brutal and honest. Lorenzo's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Even then, because you deserve someone who'll fight for you regardless of what you can give in return. Elena wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe that someone could love her, or whatever this complicated thing between them was, without expecting her to be fixed or healed or grateful. I'm still angry, she said. Good. And I'm not sleeping in your room. We're not... She gestured vaguely, unable to finish. I don't expect you to. Take whatever space you need. And if I need you to stay away from me completely, then I will. He paused. But I hope you won't, because despite everything, I think we're better at being real with each other than we are at being alone. He was right. She hated that he was right. But the honest truth was that even angry, even hurt, she felt more alive with him than she ever had before. He didn't ask her to perform or disappear. He asked her to be messy and complicated and real. That was worth something. Maybe not forgiveness, but something. Okay, she said quietly. I'll stay. For now. But Lorenzo, If you lie to me again, if you keep one more secret, I won't. You don't know that. People lie. They can't help it. Then I'll try not to. And when I fail, I'll own it immediately. No hiding, no waiting for the right time, just honesty, even when it hurts. Elena looked at the file on the table, at the man standing across from her, at the impossible situation they'd been thrust into. Nothing about this was simple. Nothing about this was fair. But maybe that was the point. Maybe real relationships weren't about fairness or simplicity. Maybe they were about two damaged people trying to be honest in a world that rewarded lies. Find out who sent those photographs, she said, and make sure they understand that I'm not some pawn to be used in your business wars. Already working on it. And Lorenzo? She met his eyes. The next time someone threatens me or tries to use me to hurt you, you tell me, immediately. I'm not fragile. I'm not going to break because things are dangerous. I'm going to break if you treat me like I'm too weak to handle the truth. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Understood. She nodded once, then walked past him toward the door. But she paused at the threshold, some impulse making her turn back. Thank you. For the file, for showing me everything. You deserve to know. I did, and you gave it to me, even though it made you look worse. She struggled for words. That means something. Lorenzo's smile was small and sad. Not enough to earn forgiveness. No, but enough to make me think that maybe, eventually, we can get there. She left before he could respond, before the moment could become something she wasn't ready for. But as she walked back to her room, Elena felt something shift inside her, not healing, that was too generous, but a small crack in the wall she'd built, letting in the possibility that maybe this marriage could become something other than a cage. Maybe it could become a choice she made every day. To stay, to try, to risk being hurt again because the alternative, disappearing completely, was worse. She wasn't there yet. Wasn't ready to forgive or trust or believe fully in Lorenzo's promises. But she was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to become the ghost her mother had been. And that, Elena thought, as she locked her door and sat at her desk, was enough for now. She pulled out the watercolors, the ones Lorenzo had given her weeks ago, and began to paint. Not the angry ocean this time. Something different, something that looked like a storm breaking, dark clouds giving way to light, chaos resolving into something clearer. She painted until her hands cramped and her eyes burned. And when she finally stopped, she looked at what she'd created and saw something she hadn't expected. Hope. Messy and imperfect and barely there, but real. And in a life built on lies and performance, real was the most valuable thing she had. 3 days after the photographs arrived, Lorenzo found who sent them. Elena was in the greenhouse when he came to her, his face dark with something she'd learned to recognize as controlled fury. She'd been trying to revive the roses again, dirt under her fingernails, hair tied back with a ribbon. The physical work helped quiet her mind, gave her something to focus on besides the constant loop of betrayal and anger and reluctant understanding. It was Matteo Russo, Lorenzo said, without preamble. One of my father's oldest rivals. He's been trying to destabilize our family for years. Elena set down the watering can. How did he get the photographs? He paid off one of the men my father hired for surveillance, got copies of everything. Lorenzo's jaw was tight. He thought if he could break us apart, it would weaken my position, make my father question my judgment. And will it? My father doesn't know about the photographs, and he won't. Lorenzo moved closer, his hands shoved deep in his pockets like he didn't trust himself not to reach for her. Russo made a mistake. He threatened you. That's not something I can ignore. What are you going to do? What needs to be done? The words were simple, but Elena heard the violence underneath. She should have been afraid, should have recoiled from the casual way he discussed retaliation. But instead she felt something else, something that terrified her more than his anger. She felt protected. Don't kill him, she said quietly. Lorenzo's eyes snapped to hers, surprise flickering across his face. What? I said don't kill him. Whatever you're planning, make it clear he crossed a line, make sure he never comes near me again, but don't... She stopped, trying to articulate something she barely understood herself. I don't want that blood on my hands, even indirectly. Elena, he violated your privacy. He tried to destroy, I know what he did, but killing him makes me part of this world in a way I'm not ready for. She met his eyes. You said I have choices, so I'm choosing this. Handle it however you need to, but not that way. Lorenzo stared at her for a long moment, and she watched him wrestle with something internal. The part of him that was his father's son, raised to meet threats with overwhelming force. And the part that had promised her autonomy even when it complicated things. Okay, he said finally. Not death, but he'll wish I'd chosen it. I can live with that. He almost smiled. Almost. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. Or more damaged. She turned back to the roses, fingers gentle on the wilted petals. I've spent my whole life being used as leverage. I won't let it happen anymore, but I also won't become someone who solves problems with violence. That's where I draw the line. Even if violence is the only language some people understand. Then translate. She looked at him over her shoulder. You're smart enough to find another way. Lorenzo moved to stand beside her, looking at the roses she was trying to save. My mother used to grow roses. Before everything. What happened to them? She stopped caring for them, and my father had them all pulled out after she died. Said they were a waste of space. His voice was flat, but Elena heard the grief underneath. I had these planted when I bought the villa. Thought maybe, I don't know. Thought maybe I could give them the life she couldn't. Elena's throat tightened. They're not dead yet, just dormant. Like you were. Like we both were. They stood in silence, the greenhouse warm around them, and Elena felt something shift again. Not forgiveness, she wasn't there yet, might never be, but understanding. This man beside her was as trapped as she'd been, just in different ways. Born into violence, raised to see threats everywhere, taught that control was the only form of safety. And he was trying to be different. Failing sometimes, succeeding others, but trying. Can I ask you something? Elena said. Always. The night of the gala, when you saw me at the window, what made you think I was worth all this trouble? Lorenzo was quiet for a moment, considering. You looked like you were making a choice. Not to jump, you were too smart for that, but to feel something real for one moment, even if it hurt. And I thought, he paused. I thought anyone brave enough to feel in a room full of people performing had to be worth knowing. I wasn't being brave, I was being reckless. Same thing, sometimes. Elena turned to face him fully. I'm still angry at you, about the surveillance, about the lies. I know, but I'm trying to understand why you did it, and I think... She struggled for words. I think maybe you were as trapped as I was, just in a different cage. That doesn't excuse it. No, but it explains it. An explanation isn't the same as justification, but it's something. She met his eyes. I need you to know that I see the difference between who you are and who you're trying to be. Between the choices you made because you had to and the ones you made because you wanted to. Lorenzo's expression cracked just slightly. I don't deserve your understanding. Probably not, but you're getting it anyway. She wiped her dirty hands on her jeans. Because I'm tired, Lorenzo. I'm tired of being angry all the time. Tired of waiting for people to hurt me. And I realized something when I was painting the other night. What? That staying angry takes as much energy as healing, and I'd rather put that energy towards something that might actually change things. She paused. That doesn't mean I forgive you. It just means I'm choosing to try to move forward instead of staying stuck in what already happened. What does moving forward look like? Elena considered the question. What did it look like? She didn't know. Had never had the luxury of deciding her own path before. Honestly, she said, I don't know, but maybe we figure it out together. Not as husband and wife pretending everything's fine, but as two people who are both trying to be something other than what we were taught to be. I can work with that. Can you? Because it means when I'm angry, I get to be angry. When I need space, you give it to me. When I say something hurts, you don't try to fix it. You just listen. Listening, I can do. And when your business puts me in danger, you tell me. You don't try to protect me from the truth because you think I can't handle it. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Speaking of which, Russo isn't working alone. He has allies in the north who are unhappy with some of my family's recent expansions. This might be bigger than one jealous rival. How much bigger? Big enough that you should know. Big enough that staying here might not be safe for a while. Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. Are you asking me to leave? I'm asking if you want to. If you'd feel safer somewhere else until this is handled. The question surprised her. A month ago, she would have jumped at the chance to escape, would have seen it as permission to run and never look back. But now, looking at Lorenzo's face, seeing the genuine concern there, she realized she didn't want to run. She wanted to stay and fight. No, she said. I'm not leaving. Elena, I said no. You don't get to protect me by sending me away. If there's danger, then we handle it together. She took a breath. That's what partners do, right? They face things together. Something shifted in Lorenzo's expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Partners. Unless you have a better word for whatever we are. No, partners works. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand found hers, fingers threading together. Thank you. For what? For staying, for trying, for being brave enough to be angry and honest and real. Elena looked at their joined hands. His was larger, scarred on the knuckles, warm. Hers was smaller, dirt-stained, trembling slightly, but together they looked right, somehow, like two broken pieces that fit. Don't thank me yet, she said. I'm probably going to make this much harder than it needs to be. Good. Easy would be boring. She laughed, unexpected and genuine. You're insane. Probably, but so are you for staying. Yeah. Elena squeezed his hand. I probably am. They stood there in the greenhouse, surrounded by plants fighting to survive, and Elena felt something that had been frozen inside her start to thaw. Not love. She wasn't naive enough to call it that. But something. Connection, maybe. The beginning of trust earned rather than demanded. I should go, Lorenzo said. Need to handle Russo before he gets brave enough to try something else. Be careful. Always am. Lorenzo. She stopped him before he could leave. I meant what I said. No killing. I heard you. Will you listen? He turned back and his smile was sharp. For you? I'll try. It wasn't a promise, but it was honest, and right now, honest was all she could ask for. After he left, Elena returned to the roses, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about choices, about how for so long she'd believed she had none, that her life was a series of things that happened to her, not decisions she made. But staying in this marriage, that was a choice. Demanding honesty from Lorenzo, that was a choice. Refusing to run when danger appeared, that was a choice too. And each choice, no matter how small, was proof that she was still here, still fighting, still refusing to disappear. The roses would grow or they wouldn't. She couldn't control that. But she could keep watering them. Keep believing that dormant things could bloom again given the right conditions. Maybe she was one of those dormant things. And maybe Lorenzo was too. Maybe they could bloom together, or maybe they'd both wilt despite their best efforts. Either way, she was choosing to try. And that choice, terrifying and liberating in equal measure, felt like the first real thing she'd done in years. Lorenzo didn't come back that night, or the next. Elena tried not to worry, tried to tell herself that whatever he was doing with Russo was necessary and would be fine. But by the third night, she was pacing her room, checking her phone obsessively for messages that didn't come. Marco found her in the library at 2 a.m, staring at a book she wasn't reading. Mrs. DeLuca, he said carefully. Mr. DeLuca asked me to tell you he's fine. He's handling business, but he's safe. Where is he? I can't say, but he wanted you to know he hasn't forgotten his promise. Which promise? Marco's expression was unreadable. To come back. The word settled into Elena's chest, heavy and meaningful. Lorenzo had promised to come back, which meant he knew there was a chance he wouldn't, which meant whatever he was doing was more dangerous than he'd let on. How long? She asked. I don't know, but Antonio DeLuca is here. He's asked to see you. Elena's blood went cold. Lorenzo's father, the man who'd ordered her surveilled, who treated his wife like property, who represented everything Elena feared becoming trapped by. Tell him I'm not available. Mrs. DeLuca, with respect, refusing him would be unwise. I don't care about wise. I care about not letting that man into my space when Lorenzo isn't here. Marco hesitated, then nodded. I'll tell him you're indisposed, but he won't accept that for long. After Marco left, Elena stood at the window, watching the ocean crash against the cliffs. She could feel Antonio's presence in the villa like a weight, heavy and oppressive. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to make herself small and invisible the way she'd been taught. But she was done being invisible. She found Antonio in Lorenzo's study, sitting behind the desk like he owned it, which, technically, he probably did. He looked up when she entered, his sharp eyes assessing her with the same clinical detachment he'd shown at their first meeting. Elena, he said, I was told you were indisposed. I changed my mind. She stayed in the doorway, not entering fully. What do you want? Direct. I like that. Antonio leaned back in his chair. I want to know if my son's marriage is going to survive the week. That's between Lorenzo and me. Not when it affects business. Lorenzo's been distracted, sloppy, making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. His gaze sharpened. I assume that's your influence. If by my influence you mean he's learning to care about something other than power, then yes. Guilty. Caring is dangerous in our world. So is being a monster, but your family seems comfortable with that. Antonio's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or respect. You have more spine than I expected. You expected me to be afraid of you. Most people are. Most people haven't spent their entire lives being afraid. Fear stops working when it's all you know. Elena stepped into the room, her hands clasped in front of her to hide their shaking. Why are you really here? To warn you. The situation with Russo is worse than Lorenzo told you. He's trying to protect you by keeping you ignorant, but ignorance in this world gets you killed. Then tell me. Antonio studied her for a long moment. Russo has been building alliances, 3 families in the north, 2 in the south. He's positioning himself to take over our territories, and he's using your marriage as proof that Lorenzo is weak, that he's too busy playing house to maintain his position. And you think he's right. I think my son is making choices that will get him killed if he's not careful. Antonio stood, moving around the desk. I also think you're the reason he's making those choices. So this is my fault. I didn't say that. I said you're the catalyst. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. Elena held her ground as he approached, refusing to back away. What do you want from me? I want you to ask yourself a question. Are you worth what Lorenzo is risking for you? His position, his safety, his life? Antonio stopped a few feet away. Because if Russo succeeds, Lorenzo dies, and you become a widow in a world that will tear you apart. The words hit like physical blows. Elena's breath caught, but she forced herself to stay steady. Lorenzo made his choices. I didn't force him to marry me. No, but you're forcing him to be someone he's not, someone soft. And softness in our world is suicide. Then maybe your world needs to change. Antonio laughed, sharp and humorless. You sound like my wife. Right before she drove herself off a cliff, the cruelty of it stole Elena's breath. Get out. Excuse me? I said get out. This is Lorenzo's house, not yours, and I won't stand here and let you use your wife's death as a weapon. You forget who you're speaking to. No, I know exactly who you are. You're the man who broke his wife so thoroughly she chose death over living with you. You're the man who taught his son that love is weakness and control is safety. And you're the man who's so terrified of losing power that you'll destroy your own son to keep it. Elena's voice was shaking now, but she didn't stop. Lorenzo is trying to be better than you, and I'd rather die helping him do that than live in whatever world you're trying to protect. Silence. Antonio stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then slowly, something shifted in his face. Not softness. Nothing about Antonio DeLuca was soft, but acknowledgement. You love him, he said. The accusation hit harder than any threat. Don't bother denying it. I can see it. You love him enough to stand here and challenge me even though you're terrified. Antonio's smile was cold. Interesting. Elena's heart was racing, her mind reeling. Did she love Lorenzo? She didn't know, didn't trust herself to know, but she cared about him, cared enough to want him to survive this, cared enough to fight for him, even when she was still angry about his betrayals. Maybe that was close enough. What Lorenzo and I have is none of your business, she said. Everything about my son is my business. Not anymore. He's a grown man. Let him make his own choices. Even if those choices kill him? Even then. Elena met Antonio's eyes. Because at least he'll die as himself, not as whatever you tried to make him. Antonio studied her for another long moment, then turned and walked toward the door. But he paused at the threshold, looking back. You're right. I broke my wife. I broke her because I didn't know how to love something without controlling it. His voice was flat, factual. Don't let Lorenzo make the same mistake. Then he was gone, leaving Elena alone in the study, her whole body trembling with adrenaline and fear and something else she couldn't name. She collapsed into the chair Antonio had vacated, pressing her hands against her face. That conversation had been the most terrifying thing she'd done since arriving at the villa. Standing up to Antonio De Luca, the man whose reputation preceded him like a storm, she must have been insane. But she'd done it. She'd stood her ground and refused to let him intimidate her. And more than that, she'd defended Lorenzo, had chosen him, even when she was still working through her anger and hurt. When had that happened? When had she gone from tolerating this marriage to actively fighting for it? She didn't have an answer. But sitting in Lorenzo's chair in his study, surrounded by the evidence of his life and work, she realized she wanted him to come home, wanted to see him walk through that door, safe and whole, and still trying to be better than his father. Come back, she whispered to the empty room. Please just come back. The ocean roared beyond the windows, and Elena sat in the darkness and waited. Lorenzo came back 4 days after Antonio's visit. Elena was in the music room playing piano because it was the only thing that kept her from losing her mind with worry. She heard the door open, felt his presence before she saw him. Her hand stilled on the keys. He looked exhausted. There was a cut above his left eyebrow, bruising on his jaw, and his shirt was wrinkled like he'd been wearing it for days. But he was alive, whole, here. You're hurt, Elena said. It's nothing. Lorenzo. Elena. He cut her off, his voice rough. Can I just be here for a minute? Without questions. She nodded, moving over on the piano bench. He crossed the room and sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. His hands rested on his knees, and she could see the split knuckles, the dried blood. They sat in silence, the only sound their breathing and the distant ocean. Finally, Lorenzo spoke. Russo won't be a problem anymore. Did you? No, I kept my promise. But let's just say he understands the consequences of threatening you. Elena wanted to ask what that meant, wanted details, but looking at Lorenzo's face, at the exhaustion, and something darker underneath, she realized she didn't need to know. Some things were better left unspoken. Your father was here, she said instead. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. What did he want? To warn me, to tell me I'm making you weak. You're not. I told him that, and I told him, she paused, the memory of that conversation still sharp. I told him he broke your mother and I wouldn't let him break you. Lorenzo turned to look at her fully, surprise written across his face. You said that to my father? Yes, and probably more than I should have. I might have told him to get out of your house. A laugh burst out of Lorenzo, unexpected and genuine. You threw my father out of the villa? Technically, I just told him to leave. He chose to listen. Elena. Lorenzo's hand found hers on the bench, his fingers threading through hers the way they had in the greenhouse. You're incredible, do you know that? I'm terrified, there's a difference. No, being terrified and doing it anyway. That's what makes you incredible. She looked at their joined hands, at the evidence of his violence next to her pianist's fingers. They were so different, but maybe that was okay. Maybe different could work. I was worried, Elena admitted. When you didn't come back, when Marco said it was dangerous, I thought, her voice caught, I thought maybe I'd never get the chance to figure out what this was, whatever we are. And what do you think we are? I don't know, not love, not yet, but She struggled for the word. Something. Something worth fighting for, worth staying for. Lorenzo lifted their joined hands, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. The gesture was gentle, careful, asking nothing. That's enough for me. Is it? Because I can't promise I'll ever fully trust you. Can't promise I won't wake up some days and still be angry about the surveillance or the lies or all the ways you failed me. I don't need you to promise anything. I just need you to keep choosing to stay, day by day, moment by moment. He met her eyes. And I'll keep choosing to be honest, to fail better, to be someone worthy of whatever small trust you can give me. Elena felt her throat tighten. This man, this dangerous, complicated, damaged man, was offering her something no one else ever had. Not perfection, not promises of happily ever after. Just the truth. Messy and difficult and real. Okay, she whispered. Okay. Okay. I'll keep choosing to stay, and you keep choosing to be honest. She paused. But Lorenzo, if this gets worse, if the danger escalates, you tell me. You don't try to protect me by hiding things. Deal. And Elena? Yeah? Thank you for standing up to my father, for defending me when I wasn't here, for being brave enough to be angry and scared and still choosing this. She leaned her head against his shoulder, exhaustion hitting her suddenly. Don't thank me yet. I'm probably going to make this so much harder than it needs to be. I'm counting on it. His arm came around her shoulders, holding her carefully. Hard means real, and real is all I want. They sat there on the piano bench, neither speaking, just existing together in the quiet. Outside, a storm was building over the ocean, clouds dark and heavy with rain. But inside, in the music room, Elena felt something she hadn't felt in years. Safe. Not because Lorenzo would protect her from everything, but because he would be honest about the threats, would give her the information she needed to protect herself. Because he saw her as a partner, not a possession, and that, terrifying and uncertain as it was, felt like the foundation of something real. The first drops of rain hit the windows, and Lorenzo's grip on her tightened slightly. Storm's coming. I know. You afraid? Elena thought about the question. A month ago, she would have said yes, would have been terrified of storms and violence and all the ways the world could hurt her. But now, sitting here with this man who'd hurt her and was trying to do better, she realized the answer had changed. No, she said. Not anymore. Not of storms, anyway. What are you afraid of? The question was quiet, genuine. Elena considered it. What was she afraid of now? Not Lorenzo, not really. Not the danger that came with his world, not even Antonio de Luca's disapproval. I'm afraid, she said slowly, that I'll forget how to fight, that I'll get comfortable and complacent and wake up one day to realize I've disappeared again. That this, whatever we're building, will become just another cage. Then we don't let it. Lorenzo's voice was firm. We keep pushing each other, keep being honest, even when it hurts. Keep choosing hard over easy. Promise? I promise. And Elena? Yeah? If you ever feel yourself disappearing, if you ever think I'm turning into my father or you're turning into your mother, you tell me. Immediately. We course correct. We don't let it happen. She nodded against his shoulder. Okay, deal. The storm broke fully then, rain lashing against the windows, wind howling through the villa. But Elena wasn't afraid, because for the first time in her life, she wasn't facing the storm alone. She was choosing to face it with someone. And that choice, difficult and dangerous and absolutely terrifying, felt like the bravest thing she'd ever done. The weeks that followed the storm felt like learning to breathe underwater. Difficult, disorienting, but necessary. Elena and Lorenzo circled each other carefully, testing the boundaries of their fragile truce, building something that felt less like a marriage and more like a partnership forged in honesty. Lorenzo kept his promise about transparency. When business required violence, he told her. When threats emerged, he shared them. When his father pushed back against his decisions, Elena heard about it before the dust settled. It wasn't comfortable. Some nights she lay awake thinking about the darkness woven through their lives, but it was real. And real, she'd learned, was worth more than comfortable. She started accompanying him to meetings. Not all of them. Some things were too dangerous, too volatile. But the legitimate business discussions, the negotiations with other families, the careful dance of power and territory. Lorenzo introduced her as his wife, his partner, and watched with barely concealed satisfaction as men who'd expected a decorative silence encountered Elena's sharp questions and sharper instincts instead. "You're enjoying this," she said one evening after a particularly tense negotiation. They were in the car heading back to the villa, and Lorenzo was smiling in that quiet way that transformed his face. "Watching Carmine Bianchi realize you understood his shell company structure better than he did? Yes, I enjoyed that immensely. I just read the reports you gave me. You read them and understood the implications. That's different." He reached across the seat, his hand finding hers. "You're good at this." "At what? Being suspicious of everyone?" "At seeing through performance. At recognizing when people are lying." He paused. "It's a useful skill in this world." Elena looked out the window at the darkening coastline. "I learned it from my father. Spent my whole childhood watching him perform one version of himself for the world and another behind closed doors. You get good at spotting the gaps between what people say and what they mean. I'm sorry you had to learn that way." "Don't be. It kept me alive." She squeezed his hand. "And it's keeping us alive now." The villa came into view, and Elena felt something she never expected. She was glad to see it. Somewhere along the way, this place had stopped being a cage and started being home. Not because it was safe or perfect, but because it was theirs. A space they were building together, decision by decision, choice by choice. Inside, Marco met them at the door, his expression carefully neutral. "Mr. DeLuca, Mrs. DeLuca, your father is here." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. "Where?" "The study. He's been waiting for 2 hours." Elena felt Lorenzo's hand tense in hers. Antonio's visits were never casual, never good news. "Do you want me there?" she asked quietly. "Yes, if you're willing. Always." They found Antonio at Lorenzo's desk again, and Elena felt a flash of irritation. The man had a gift for claiming space that wasn't his. But this time, when he looked up, his expression was different, less hostile, more resigned, maybe. "Father," Lorenzo said, "what do you want?" "To talk. About the business. About your future." Antonio's eyes flicked to Elena. "And about what you're building here." "If this is another lecture about Elena making me weak, it's not." Antonio stood, moving around the desk. "I was wrong. About her. About what she represents." The admission hung in the air, shocking in its simplicity. Elena exchanged a glance with Lorenzo, seeing her own surprise mirrored in his face. "You were wrong," Lorenzo repeated slowly. "Don't sound so shocked. I'm capable of admitting mistakes." Antonio's mouth twisted. "Rarely, but capable." He looked at Elena directly. "You stood up to me, defended my son when he couldn't defend himself. That took courage. Or stupidity. I'm still deciding which." "Both, probably," Elena said. Antonio almost smiled. "Yes, both." He turned to Lorenzo. "The families in the north have backed down. Russo's allies scattered after his accident. Your position is secure, stronger than before, actually. Because they're afraid of what I'll do if they cross me. No, because they respect what you've built here. A partnership, an alliance that can't be easily broken or manipulated." Antonio's gaze moved between them. "I spent 30 years trying to teach you that power comes from control, but you're proving me wrong. Power comes from trust, from having someone at your side who'll fight for you even when you're not there." Lorenzo's hand found Elena's again, fingers threading together. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm stepping back. The business is yours, the territories, the alliances, the decisions, all of it. I'm done." Antonio's voice was flat, but Elena heard something underneath. Relief, maybe, or exhaustion. "I'm an old man who broke his wife and nearly broke his son trying to build an empire. It's time to let you build something different." "Father, don't argue with me. For once, Just accept that I'm giving you what you wanted. Antonio moved toward the door, pausing beside Elena. Take care of him. He's softer than he pretends to be. I know, Elena said. So am I. Yes, I'm beginning to see that. Antonio looked at Lorenzo one more time. Your mother would be proud of you, of what you're becoming. I wanted you to know that. Then he was gone, leaving them alone in the study with the weight of that admission settling around them. Lorenzo sank into his chair, looking shell-shocked. Did that just happen? I think so. Unless we're both hallucinating. He's never admitted he was wrong about anything, not once in my entire life. Elena moved around the desk, leaning against it beside him. Maybe he's learning too, in his own broken way. You think people like him can change? I think people like him can recognize when they've caused damage. Whether that's the same as changing, she shrugged. I don't know, but it's something. Lorenzo pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. The gesture was becoming familiar, comfortable in a way that still surprised her. What do we do now? What do you want to do? He stopped, considering. I want to build something different. Not just continue what my father started, but actually change it. Make the legitimate businesses the priority, phase out the violence. He looked up at her. I want us to build something we're not ashamed of. That's going to take time. I know, years probably. But if we're going to do this, if we're going to make this marriage real, I don't want it built on blood and fear. Elena traced the cut above his eyebrow, the one from the Russo situation. It was healing, leaving a thin scar. You'll always have scars. We both will. The violence doesn't just disappear because we want it to. But we can choose not to add new ones. We can choose to do better, even if better is slow and imperfect. Okay, Elena said. Then let's do that. Let's build something better. Lorenzo kissed her then, gentle and searching, and Elena kissed him back, tasting possibility and hope and all the complicated emotions that came with choosing someone despite their flaws. When they broke apart, she rested her forehead against his. I'm still angry sometimes, she admitted, about the surveillance, about the lies. Sometimes I wake up and it hits me all over again. I know. And you should be. That anger is valid. But I'm also... She struggled for words. I'm also starting to believe you. That you're trying. That this could be real. It is real. Messy and complicated and imperfect, but real. Yeah. Elena smiled, small and genuine. It is. Check. 3 months later, Elena discovered she was pregnant. She'd been feeling off for weeks, exhausted, nauseous, emotional in ways that didn't match her usual patterns. She'd dismissed it as stress, as the weight of learning to navigate her new role in Lorenzo's business. But when she missed her period for the second time, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She took the test alone in her bathroom, hands shaking as she waited for the results. When the 2 lines appeared, clear and unmistakable, she sat on the floor and cried. Not from sadness or fear, exactly, but from the overwhelming reality of it. She was going to be a mother. A child would be born into this world she was still figuring out how to survive in. A child who would carry both her damage and Lorenzo's, who would grow up knowing violence existed but hopefully never experiencing it directly. A child who would need her to be strong and present and not disappeared into silence. She didn't know if she could be that person. Didn't know if she was ready. But ready or not, it was happening. She found Lorenzo in the greenhouse working on the roses. They'd been growing slowly, gaining strength. Some had even bloomed, small pink flowers that smelled like hope. We need to talk, Elena said. Lorenzo looked up, immediately reading something in her expression. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Or maybe everything's wrong. I don't know yet. She moved closer, her hands twisting together. Lorenzo, I'm pregnant. He went very still. The pruning shears in his hand dropped to the ground. You're pregnant. About 8 weeks, I think. I took a test this morning. Actually, I took 3 tests. All positive. Lorenzo crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands cupping her face. Elena, how do you feel? Terrified, excited, nauseous, confused. She laughed, shaky and overwhelmed. All of it. I'm feeling all of it. Do you want... He stopped, recalibrating. What do you need? From me? From this? The question steadied her. Not what did she want to do about it, but what did she need? That distinction mattered. I need you to be honest with me about what this means, she said. For us, for the business, for the danger we're in. I need to know what we're bringing a child into. Lorenzo's hands moved to her shoulders, grounding. Okay, honestly, this changes things. A child makes us vulnerable in ways we weren't before. People will see them as leverage, as a weakness to exploit. So we're bringing them into danger. We're bringing them into our world. And yes, that includes danger. But it also includes us, two people who are choosing to do better than our parents did, who are trying to build something worth protecting. He paused. Elena, I can't promise you safety. I can't promise this will be easy, but I can promise that I will spend every day of my life making sure our child knows they're wanted, loved, not traded or used or turned into a chess piece. Elena's throat tightened. What if I can't do this? What if I become my mother, silent and broken and unable to protect them? You won't. How do you know? Because you're already fighting not to. Because you stand up to my father and demand honesty and refuse to disappear even when it would be easier. His hands moved to her stomach, resting there gently. You're the strongest person I know, Elena, and you're going to be an incredible mother. I don't feel strong. I feel scared. Good. Scared means you care. Scared means you're taking this seriously. He pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her. We'll figure this out. Together. Like we figure out everything else. Elena let herself lean into him, let herself be held. For so long, she'd equated vulnerability with weakness. But standing here pregnant and terrified and choosing to trust someone anyway, she realized vulnerability could be strength too. The strength to admit you couldn't do it alone. The strength to let someone else help carry the weight. I want this, she said quietly. I'm terrified, but I want this. I want us to be parents. I want to give this child what we never had. Then we will. Lorenzo pressed a kiss to her temple. We'll mess up. We'll make mistakes. But we'll do it together, and we'll do it better than our parents did. That's all we can promise. Is that enough? It has to be. They stood there in the greenhouse, surrounded by roses that were learning to bloom again, and Elena felt something shift inside her. Not the absence of fear. Fear was still there, sharp and insistent, but beneath it something else. Hope. Real, fragile, absolutely terrifying hope. She was going to be a mother, and Lorenzo was going to be a father, and together they were going to figure out how to raise a child in a world that was both beautiful and brutal, full of danger and possibility. It wouldn't be perfect. Nothing about their lives was perfect, but it would be real, and real was all that mattered. The pregnancy was difficult. Elena's body rebelled against the changes, morning sickness that lasted all day, exhaustion that made her feel like she was moving through water. Lorenzo hovered, protective and worried, until she finally snapped at him to stop treating her like she was fragile. I'm growing a human, she said one morning after he'd tried to physically carry her down the stairs. Not dying. I can walk. You almost fainted yesterday. Almost, but didn't. Lorenzo, you need to let me do things. I'm not disappearing just because I'm pregnant. He'd backed off after that, finding a better balance between protective and suffocating. But Elena could see the fear in his eyes every time she winced or moved too slowly. He was terrified of losing her the way he'd lost his mother, terrified that history would repeat itself despite his best efforts. I'm not her, Elena told him one night as they lay in bed. His bed now, not separate rooms. That change had happened gradually, naturally, until sleeping apart felt stranger than sleeping together. I'm not your mother, and you're not your father. We get to write our own story. I know, but knowing doesn't stop me from being scared. Good. Be scared. Just don't let fear make you controlling. Don't let it turn you into him. Lorenzo pulled her closer, his hand resting on her growing stomach. Promise me something. What? If I start becoming him, if you see me trying to control you or make decisions for you or treating you like you're breakable, you'll call me on it, immediately. Don't let me slide into those patterns. I promise. But you have to promise the same thing. If you see me disappearing, if I start becoming silent and small, you push back. You don't let me fade. Deal. They lay in the darkness, and Elena felt the baby move for the first time, a flutter, barely there, but unmistakable. She gasped, grabbing Lorenzo's hand and pressing it to her stomach. Did you feel that? Wait, was that? That was them. The baby. Lorenzo's expression cracked open, wonder and fear and love all mixed together. They're real. I mean, I knew they were real, but yeah, real. They stayed like that for a long time, feeling the small movements, the proof of life they'd created. And Elena thought about choices, about how she'd spent her whole life believing she had none. And now here she was, choosing to bring a child into the world. Choosing to build a family with a man who was still learning how to love without controlling. It was the scariest choice she'd ever made. It was also the most hopeful. 7 months into the pregnancy, Elena's father came to the villa. She was in the garden, moving slowly through the roses that were blooming fully now when Marco appeared with news that made her blood run cold. Giulio Vieri is at the gates, he said. Mr. De Luca said you should decide whether to let him in. Elena's hands went instinctively to her swollen stomach. She hadn't seen her father since the wedding, hadn't wanted to. He represented everything she was trying not to become. Silence, control, the slow death of self. But he was still her father, and some part of her needed to face him, to show him what she'd become. Let him in, she said. But Lorenzo stays with me. Already here. Lorenzo appeared beside her, his hand finding the small of her back. You don't have to do this. Yes, I do. They met Giulio in the main sitting room. He looked older than Elena remembered, grayer, worn down by something she couldn't name. His eyes tracked over her, stopping on her pregnant stomach with an expression she couldn't read. Elena, he said, you look well. I am well. And pregnant, I see. Congratulations. The word felt hollow, perfunctory. Elena's jaw tightened. Why are you here? To see my daughter. To see how you've... He stopped, searching for words. To see if you're happy. Since when do you care if I'm happy? Giulio flinched. It was subtle, easily missed, but Elena saw it. I care more than you think. You had an interesting way of showing it, trading me like currency, teaching me that silence was survival, making sure I knew my only value was in being useful to your alliances. I was trying to protect you. By making me invisible? Elena's voice rose despite her best efforts. By teaching me to disappear? That's not protection, Papa. That's erasure. Lorenzo's hand squeezed her back gently, a silent reminder that he was there, that she wasn't alone in this. Giulio looked at Lorenzo, then back to Elena. I see he treats you well. He treats me like a person, like someone whose opinions matter, like someone who exists. Elena took a breath, steadying herself. I'm not here to punish you. I'm not even here to forgive you. I'm just here to tell you that I'm choosing differently, for my child, for myself. I'm choosing to exist loudly instead of quietly. And that choice, that's my final rejection of everything you taught me. Silence. Giulio's expression shifted through several emotions, pain, regret, something that might have been pride. Your mother would be proud of you. Mama is still alive. You could tell her yourself if you bothered to see her as something other than a ghost. She's not present because you spent 30 years teaching her that presence was dangerous, Elena cut in, just like you taught me. But I'm breaking that pattern, and maybe, if you tried, you could help her break it too. Giulio looked away, and Elena saw the truth in his face. He didn't know how. Didn't know how to love without controlling, how to see his wife as anything other than what he'd made her. It was sad, tragic even. But it wasn't Elena's responsibility to fix. I should go, Giulio said. I just wanted to know that you were... He stopped, unable to finish. I'm okay, Elena said. Better than okay? I'm choosing my life instead of enduring it. That's all I needed you to see. Her father nodded once, formal and stiff. Then he looked at Lorenzo. Take care of her. She takes care of herself, Lorenzo said evenly. I just stand beside her while she does it. Something flickered in Giulio's expression. Understanding, maybe. Or the recognition of his own failures reflected back at him. He left without another word, and Elena watched him go with a strange mix of sadness and relief. "You okay?" Lorenzo asked after the door closed. "Yeah, I think I am." Elena turned to face him. "I needed to do that. Needed him to see that I survived him, that I became something other than what he tried to make me. You're incredible. You know that?" "I'm tired and pregnant, and my back hurts." Lorenzo smiled. "Incredible, tired, pregnant, and your back hurts. All of those things can be true." Elena laughed despite herself. "Take me to bed. I need to lie down before I fall down." "At your service." As Lorenzo helped her upstairs, Elena thought about her father, about the choices he'd made that had shaped her entire childhood, about the damage he'd done without even realizing it, and about how she was going to make different choices. Better choices. Choices that let her child know they were seen and heard and valued exactly as they were. It wouldn't be perfect. She'd mess up. She'd have days where old patterns crept in, where silence felt safer than speaking, but she'd keep fighting those patterns, keep choosing presence over absence, keep being the mother her own mother hadn't been allowed to be. And that, she thought as Lorenzo settled her into bed and pressed a kiss to her forehead, was enough. Elena went into labor 3 weeks early, on a Tuesday morning when the ocean was glass calm and the sky was that perfect blue that made everything seem possible. The pain came in waves, manageable at first, then overwhelming. Lorenzo drove too fast to the hospital, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, terror written across his face. Elena would have found it funny if she wasn't too busy breathing through contractions that felt like her body was trying to tear itself apart. "I can't do this," she gasped between contractions. "Yes, you can." "No, I'm serious. I've changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore." Lorenzo's laugh was half hysterical. "Little late for that." "This is your fault. I accept full responsibility." "You should. You and your—" Another contraction hit, stealing her words. When it passed, she grabbed his hand so hard he winced. "If you ever come near me again, I'll kill you." Noted. The delivery was long, painful. Elena screamed and cursed and threatened Lorenzo's life at least 15 times. But when the doctor finally placed the baby on her chest, a girl, tiny and pink and screaming with impressive volume, everything else disappeared. "Hi," Elena whispered, staring at this impossible creature they'd made. "Hi, I'm your mom." The baby stopped crying, her dark eyes, Lorenzo's eyes, finding Elena's face, and Elena felt something inside her break open completely. Not the painful breaking of trauma, but the good kind. The kind that let light in. "She's perfect," Lorenzo said, his voice rough. "Elena, don't say perfect. She's real. That's better." "Okay. She's real. And ours. And—" His voice cracked. "I'm so proud of you." Elena looked up at him, at this man who'd been watching her with undisguised awe for the past 10 hours. "I couldn't have done it without you." "Yes, you could have, but I'm glad you didn't have to." They named her Sophia after Lorenzo's mother. It felt right, taking the name of a woman who'd been broken and giving it to a child who would be taught to be strong, who would grow up knowing she was loved, not for what she could give or how useful she could be, but simply because she existed. The first few weeks were chaos. Sophia didn't sleep. She cried constantly. Elena was exhausted and overwhelmed and terrified she was doing everything wrong. Lorenzo helped when he could, but he was also navigating the business changes he'd promised, trying to build something legitimate while old enemies circled. One night, when Sophia was 3 weeks old and screaming for the 4th time that night, Elena broke down. "I can't do this. I'm failing her. I don't know what she needs, and I'm so tired I can't think, and—" "Elena." Lorenzo took Sophia gently, holding her against his chest. "You're not failing, you're learning. We both are." "But what if I mess her up? What if I teach her all the wrong things, or should I—" "Then we'll figure it out, together. That's all we can do. Try our best and fix our mistakes when we make them." He swayed gently, and Sophia's cries started to quiet. You're a good mother, even when you don't feel like it. How do you know? Because you care enough to worry, because you're fighting not to repeat your parents' mistakes, because you're here at 3 in the morning, terrified but trying anyway. He looked at their daughter, his expression soft. That's all she needs. Your presence, your honesty, your love, imperfect as it is. Elena wiped her eyes, exhaustion and emotion making everything feel too big. I love you. I don't think I've said that yet, but I do. I love you, even though you're still learning and you still mess up sometimes and you're not perfect. Lorenzo looked up, surprise and something else flickering across his face. You love me. Yeah. Terrifying, right? Completely. He crossed to her, Sophia still in his arms, and kissed Elena gently. I love you too. Have for a while, actually. Was just waiting for the right time to say it. Is 3 in the morning while our daughter screams the right time? Seems as good as any. Elena laughed, exhausted and happy and overwhelmed. We're a mess. Yeah, but we're a mess together. Sophia chose that moment to let out another wail, and they both groaned. But as Lorenzo handed her back to Elena for feeding, as they settled into the rhythm they were still learning, Elena felt something she'd never felt before. Complete. Not because Lorenzo had fixed her, or because Sophia had filled some void, but because she'd chosen this, had chosen to build this family, to love these people, to exist loudly and imperfectly and really. She'd chosen. And that choice had changed everything. 6 months later, Elena stood in the greenhouse with Sophia on her hip, showing her the roses. See these? She said, even though Sophia was too young to understand. These were dying when I got here. Everyone thought they were dead, but they just needed time and care, and someone who believed they could bloom again. Sophia grabbed at a pink flower, her chubby fist closing around the petals. Elena gently extracted them before any damage was done. Gentle, she said. We're gentle with things that are growing. Lorenzo appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Teaching her about roses? Teaching her about second chances. He smiled, crossing to them. Sophia immediately reached for him, and he took her, settling her against his chest. How was the meeting with the lawyers? Good. The foundation paperwork is almost done. We should be operational by next month. The foundation had been Elena's idea, using some of Lorenzo's money to help women leaving dangerous situations, providing them with resources, housing, therapy, giving them the tools to choose their own futures. It felt right, taking what they'd learned from their own damage and using it to help others. Your father would hate it, Elena said. Probably. But he's retired. Doesn't get a vote. Lorenzo kissed Sophia's head. What do you think, little one? Should we help people who need it? Sophia gurgled, which they chose to interpret as approval. She's brilliant, Lorenzo said seriously. Already solving complex moral questions. Elena laughed. She'd just spit up on your shirt. Even more brilliant, she knows how to assert dominance. They walked through the villa together, and Elena marveled at how different this felt from those first awful weeks. How they'd built something real out of fear and damage and desperate hope. It wasn't perfect. They still fought, still struggled, still had days where old patterns crept in and they had to consciously choose differently. But it was theirs. Built on choices instead of obligations, on honesty instead of performance, on two people who'd been taught to disappear learning to exist together instead. That night, after Sophia was asleep and they were curled together in bed, Lorenzo said, "Are you happy?" Elena considered the question. Was she happy? Not in the simple, uncomplicated way happiness was supposed to feel, but in a deeper, more complex way. Happy because she was choosing this life, because she was present in it, because she'd stopped disappearing. Yes, she said. I'm happy. Scared sometimes. Overwhelmed often, but happy. Good. That's all I want. For you to choose this. Every day. Not because you have to, but because you want to. I do want this. Elena turned to face him. I want you. I want Sophia. I want this complicated, messy, imperfect life we're building. I want all of it. Lorenzo kissed her, slow and deep. Then let's keep building it, together. Together, Elena agreed. Outside, the ocean crashed against the cliffs. relentless and eternal. Inside, Elena lay in her husband's arms and felt something she'd never thought possible. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of choice. The knowledge that whatever came next, she wouldn't face it by disappearing. She'd face it by choosing, by fighting, by existing as loudly and messily and really as possible. She'd been the silent bride, the traded daughter, the woman who learned to survive by becoming invisible. But she wasn't that anymore. Now she was Elena DeLuca, wife, mother, partner, woman who painted angry oceans and grew roses from dead things and loved imperfectly but honestly. She was the woman who chose. And that choice, brave and terrifying and absolutely real, had changed everything. In the nursery down the hall, Sophia slept. In the greenhouse, roses bloomed. In this bed, two damaged people held each other and chose, every day, to keep trying, keep building, keep being real even when performance would be easier. It wasn't a fairy tale ending. There was no happily ever after, no promise that everything would always be okay. There would be struggles ahead, threats, failures, days when old wounds opened and they had to choose again whether to stay or run, but they would face it together, honestly, imperfectly. Really. And that, Elena thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was more than enough. It was everything.